Austin, before we get to the Commanders aspect of it, we're not going to have time because of all the things we're going to talk about to do what I did with my previous guest and David, and let's go through obviously all six of the quarterbacks that are projected to go in the first round. But I do want to ask you because I know we touched on this a little bit when I went on your show about a month ago, but the Chicago situation. Um, I don't get the people out there that say, "Oh, keep Justin Fields and trade the pick or draft Marvin Harrison." Like, I think Caleb Williams is a generational prospect. I think Justin Fields can be a good quarterback in the right situation. I just don't think Chicago is that situation. I think he's the fourth best quarterback in that division, and we'll see obviously what Kirk Cousins does, whether he's in Minnesota or not. But I just think that Caleb Williams, I think every year we do this, right? We break down the number one pick and we try to find something and anything about them to sort of dispute them. And I think with Caleb, it's more the emotional side, the fact he painted his nails. I don't care anything about that. I care about the fact that, his 8 losses in college, his defense, the least amount of points they gave up was 35. He's going to be an absolute special talent. If I was your Commanders, I would 100% call Chicago and try to trade up for that number one pick. Because I think that's something Chicago would do because they're the Bears and they haven't figured out a quarterback in what feels like 100 years. But just your thoughts on Caleb versus Fields and where are you at on? I'm not even going to call it a debate. I think some people are on the Field side, but where are you at on the situation?
I think that with the news that's come out with Justin Fields, if you don't get a package you like, you keep him. I think there's no sense in trading him away for a fourth, fifth, sixth, or seventh round pick. You keep him for one more year. And this might be an unpopular opinion, and I might be biased when I say this. Um, if you don't like the package that you get for Fields, you obviously keep him in. I think you get way more for that number one pick regardless. I think if you look at the lesser of two evils, you're probably saying to yourself, you pick Caleb Williams. Even if you have Justin Fields on the roster, you still need to pick Caleb Williams, let him develop for a year. I don't know if Ryan Poles would be really willing to do that because I think they want to go one way or the other. I don't think there should be any disdain or confliction in that quarterback room. If they don't like what they're getting for Fields and they view him higher than what they're getting, keep him for a year, and I'll be damned. But at the end of the day, you could trade that number one pick for some significant value in return. Build around Fields. I know it's an unpopular opinion. You get him a guy like Marvin Harrison Jr., you draft another offensive lineman with that 9 pick, you'll be loaded. Some team will give you the Godfather offer. I think the only team that could realistically give him that offer are the Commanders and maybe New England. But I think New England is going to trade back. We'll get to that later.
That's
But
interesting because I don't. I know you've been hearing my podcast for the last couple of days. I do feel like New England takes whoever Chicago and Washington end up do not taking. So then let's move to your Commanders. And I know we talked about this when I was on your show, and I don't know if we're in complete unison agreement about this, but I am not the biggest fan of Drake May. He reminds me a little bit of Mitch Trubisky, reminds me a little bit of Zach Wilson, reminds me a little bit of Will Levis, just in terms of more arm and more show than talent. And I think the fact that there is not a universal consensus on him like there was last year at this time is a little bit concerning for me. I really like Jayden Daniels out of LSU. I think if he gets the right team, the right fit, he could be a special talent. That's where I think the Commanders will draft Drake May. I think they should draft Jayden Daniels. As a Commanders fan, take me through what you're thinking.
so if we're going to get rid of the obvious, I would be telling you find a way to trade up to one or hope to God Chicago screws up the pick. That's what I would tell you right off the bat. If that doesn't happen, which is probably about 90 to 95% true, I think that this team, there's two sides of the coin. The one side is if you go with Drake May, he's been in an air raid system before. He knows familiar terminology. You have Cliff Kingsbury who would develop him. It's a little bit untraditional, a little bit, out of Cliff Kingsbury's way in terms of who he likes in a quarterback, because he likes those mobile, athletic, elusive quarterbacks like Kyler Murray who can also throw the ball. So I think that if they were to go quarterback, I honestly think they should go Jayden Daniels as well. I've heard Dan Quinn talk about Jayden Daniels as a game changer on public radio. And I think if you're going to speak about someone in that high regard, probably have a very significant interest in him. But the one thing that I will say about Drake May, and it is going to take some lobbying from a lot of people, but I think in the end, if they do go Drake May, here's why I'm sold. I think he can be the guy in Washington. His size is huge. I like that a lot. He can throw the ball. Sure, he's had some inconsistency spots from here to there, but again, he could have been in Alabama playing. He transferred away from that Alabama spot, went to North Carolina, which is, let's call it how it is, a lesser team than Alabama. I look at Drake May as a prototypical copy of Justin Herbert and Josh Allen. And I like that a lot. If I could have Josh Allen right now, hell, I don't care about the turnovers. I know he can win
Oh
games.
no, I
Can
I
he
completely
beat
agree.
can he
I
beat the Chiefs? No, but like
Well,
he
in the
can
regular
win
season, he
games.
can, just not in the postseason. By the way, it's not really his fault. Some of those postseason losses, obviously. And for the record, when we were both at Bucksville Radio in 2018, I was on the air defending Josh Allen. I thought he should have been the number one pick that year. Some people didn't think he was going to even make it out of the first round. So we all know that the draft is a crapshoot. I wasn't going to initially ask you about this, but you perked my interest with it. So New England. So you think they're going to trade back? There's the thought out there that at number three, they could give Mac Jones sort of one more year, draft a Marvin Harrison at three if he's still there, and give Mac Jones one more year. I think Mac has been bad in the locker room for New England. I don't think he works. I think he's been a bad apple the wrong way. Like if I'm them, if Washington takes Jayden Daniels, I probably go after Drake May. If Washington takes Drake May, I'm going after Jayden Daniels, which would be a complete culture shift from what they had with Belichick. But I do think Gerard Mayo, even though he's a defensive guy, unlike Belichick, I don't think he's completely tone deaf to offense. I think that they do spin. They do what Jacksonville sort of did a couple years ago, and they brought in Christian Kirk and Evan Ingram and those guys, and they spent some money in free agency. But to me, New England's not going to be as bad next year as they are right now. At least I don't think so. And I think this quarterback class is so rich with potential talent. You cannot risk Mac Jones stinking again next year and you being at the top of the draft. I'm taking a quarterback right now at number three. I don't care what I get. I got to make sure that I get my guy because I know Washington, Chicago are probably going to get their guys. So if I'm New England, I probably know already who I'm going to be locked in on.
With New England, I have them trading back. I did a mock draft before I came on here, and it makes too much sense to me why they would trade back because when you have a team like Vegas who's desperate, I think Vegas goes into the top three. I think one of these three teams are going to trade out of the top three. I think New England's going to be that team. And I really do believe that Antonio Pierce, he doesn't want to be having that interim label. I think he wants to finally get a guy that he can trust in. And I like that the fact that if they go into the top three, give up a haul, they're going to have to. They give up a haul, go into the top three. If you want my honest opinion, the scenario also has Fields going to New England. That's how I
He's
look at
going
it.
to New England. Whoa.
Yeah, I think
That I
Fields.
did not see coming because I had Fields earmarked to Atlanta, but now it sounds like Kirk Cousins could be on his way to Atlanta, which shocked me a little bit because I had him staying in Minnesota. So wow. So Chicago would trade Fields to New England. What would New England give up in that scenario?
They have a good amount of draft picks. I think that they would give up around a 3 or a 4. I think Chicago's going to be restless. They're going to be like, we have got to get rid of Justin
See,
Fields.
I don't know about that. I think at the very least, Chicago's getting a second round pick.
I
It's the
don't.
it's the quarterback position. Like That's the thing. And by the way, it's not like Justin Fields has been Mac Jones. Justin Fields is better than Mac Jones. Justin Fields can win games. I also think this, and I know he did play at Ohio State, but I think Justin's style sort of fits in a warm weather sort of dome and not going up against great defensive minded coaches in Sean McDermott and Robert Sala and whoever Miami would get as their defensive coordinator. Like I don't think he works there. Um, I personally thought that he would work perfectly in Atlanta. But again, if they don't get Kirk Cousins, like I've heard Pittsburgh, I don't think he works in Pittsburgh at all. I don't see Mike Tomlin dealing with a kid like that when you already have a kid on the roster and Kenny Pickett. Like, so I don't know. Speaking of which, I'm gonna ask you this question next, since we're on the topic. Let's talk about the guy that just got cut today in Russell Wilson in Denver. So I've been saying that to me, if Russ does not go to Pittsburgh, I think he's as big of a star quarterback, even though he's not as good as what he used to be. But I think his brand is so big that I like Cam Newton. I don't think he can be a backup in the NFL. So I think if Russ doesn't end up in Pittsburgh, I think that's like the only landing spot for him now, unless Minnesota maybe wants to try and take a grab at him, though maybe they want to go with a younger guy. Like to me, I think there's a scenario where Russell Wilson next year starts the season not on an NFL roster.
I agree with you all the way on that. I think with the point that you said with the brand, I think the Russell Wilson brand is big. But when we say the Russell Wilson brand is big, a team that I can easily see outside of Pittsburgh, because I have two teams that you could potentially go to. Pittsburgh is one of them. Because I think Pittsburgh, if they really feel like they're inclined to, they might take a stab at Russell for cheap money. Another team that would take a stab at Russell Wilson for cheap money to test their quarterback, I think, would be the New York Giants. I think the New York Giants would maybe want to say, listen, we understand that Daniel Jones has had his injuries. We understand that we are on the hook for $40 million a year with him. But when you talk about branding, New York Giants are the biggest brand in New York City, roughly. And Russell Wilson has a huge brand on his own to where he could be, I don't want to say he could be the face of New York City, but he could be a very big icon in a city filled with icons. It would make too much sense for me. It would be crazy enough for the Giants to do it. I think the Giants don't even go quarterback in the first round. They probably end up with like a Malik Neighbors or a Roma Dunze.
And
But
by the way, real quick on both those kids, because I like them both, but some of these mock drafts have Neighbors over Marvin Harrison Jr. I don't get it.
I don't get it either, because Marvin Harrison Jr. is the Bolitnikoff winner for a reason. He is the
Yeah,
best wide receiver in the country in
I think
college
Marvin
for a
Harrison is a
reason.
Justin Jefferson, Jamar Chase, day one, walk in, Pro Bowl, perennial, top 5, 6 superstar wide receiver.
Yeah. I think Marvin Harrison Jr. is going to change a franchise. And if he goes to
Yeah,
Arizona, which I predict he's going to go to Arizona,
I
then
completely
him and
agree with you on
Kyler
that.
Murray are going to have a very good rapport. I like that a lot to help out a guy that you trust in with Kyler Murray. And listen, Jonathan Gannon's a good coach. He was a very good. Say what you want about Jonathan Gannon. Say what you want. But when he came into Philadelphia's house, what happened? What happened? He beat you
You
guys.
have to remind me about that game that broke my heart on New Year's Eve.
I know, I know.
Watching my defense because we have a guy who I don't know if you can see this. Once again, I'm going to pull this out. We have a guy named Coach Pencil who can't stop a nosebleed. We couldn't get off the field on New Year's Eve. Oh my God. Anyway, I do agree with you on that. I agree with you on Russell Wilson potentially going to the Giants. I just don't know, man. If I'm a general manager, and I've always said I think the cap is sometimes a myth because we see the good teams manipulate the cap, but still, I realize it's a mistake, and I'm all for hey, let's move off our mistakes. But if I'm paying a guy $40 million and I can't move off him, I feel like I gotta play him.
Yeah, I get that. And, traditional thinking would have you say you have to keep him. But look at what the Broncos just did.
Yeah, I mean,
They
the
got rid
Giants,
of
they
Russ,
should
so
cut
anything
Daniel
can
Jones.
happen now, Brandon. Anything can happen. Who knows? The Giants could get rid of Daniel Jones next year if they really want to do, because he's either A, injured, B, underperforming, or C, they realize they messed up.
And
That's
D, all
power.
the above, which is
Exactly.
probably the
D, all
case.
the above. I just don't know. I think if Russ were to go to a team, because I like the point about the big brand that you said, I think New York would be a perfect spot. Not the Jets, because I think the Jets, if we start talking about some of these other quarterbacks in the draft, I think they draft the quarterback this draft. I think they get a guy
Yeah,
to go
I mean,
behind Aaron
I
Rodgers.
I would. By the way, I've also floated out there. I think a perfect backup to Aaron, Jimmy Garoppolo.
Yeah. Jimmy Garoppolo seems like a guy who, if Aaron were to have another catastrophic injury again, you could go with a Jimmy Garoppolo, because we know that he can play to a certain level. Is he as
Yep.
bad as Zach Wilson? No. I think Zach Wilson just got bombarded with pressure. Let's just be honest. I think
Yep.
the pressure
No,
mounted
I
for him.
I agree. By the way, I didn't like him coming out of college. I thought it was a bad fit for him with the Jets, anyways. I didn't think he was going to succeed. I also think, by the way, Jimmy going back to New England and backing up whichever quarterback they don't draft, because I think Mac Jones, I think Gerard Mayo may just reset the quarterback room. Zappy ain't it. We know Mac Jones ain't it. There's reports out there. GMs don't even want to give him a fifth round pick for Mac Jones. The dude was a first round pick. And really, first year rookie with McDaniels with not a lot of talent played pretty well. And now all of a sudden you can't even get a fifth round pick more. It's crazy.
Yeah, it's wild what has happened with Mac Jones. I almost feel bad for him, because I feel like when you are labeled as the guy who has to replace a legend in Tom Brady, it could either go one of two ways. One, it could go like Mac Jones, because Mac Jones did not play up to his level. He I feel like pressure may have got to a young guy as well. Or it can go to option number two with, look at what happened with Baker Mayfield. Baker Mayfield was already in the league before then. He knew that this was kind of like his revitalized time to maybe get something going in Tampa, and he did. He got him to a playoff in a weak division. I think Tampa goes back with Baker Mayfield, but that's not the point. Regardless, you can either take that motivation and say, I know I'm not going to be Tom Brady. I'm going to be myself, and I'm going to just try and play the best I can. Or you're going to be like Mac Jones, who tries to be the guy who has to replace Tom Brady. Maybe he has to think about it too much. I guess that's kind of what I have to say. But again, a Belichick offense is never good. It's only defense with them, and it's just kind of the lay of the land with that. So
Let me ask you a quick question before we wrap up NFL here, related to Kirk Cousins, obviously your former quarterback in Washington. As I said initially, I thought it was a slam dunk. He stays in Minnesota. Reports are out there now that he is probably going to Atlanta. So if that's the case, what does Minnesota do? Because I don't know where they would go.
I think Minnesota drafts a quarterback, and I think they get Michael Penix. I like
Oh
Michael
wow.
Penix. I think
Okay.
Michael
Well,
Penix would be a guy that they would consider, because you have to look at some of these other quarterbacks around the league. When I look at Michael Penix, I think he's like another Tua. Okay, I think you need to put a lot of talent around him for him to succeed. And I think if you're going to go ahead and start somewhere, you want to start with the best wide receiver in the league, in Justin Jefferson. Then you're going to want to try and essentially set him up to succeed in the right way. And with Michael Penix, you have Hawkinson, you have Justin Jefferson. You're assumingly going to get another running back. I just think it would make too much sense to try and restart their clock, rather than knowing that, okay, we might try to get Kirk Cousins cool, we might try to bring him back. But when you look at the formation of that division, the Lions are there, Green Bay Packers have arrived. And if the Bears go ahead and get Caleb Williams, why would you bring back Kirk just to be
yeah,
mediocre?
no,
I
I
feel
mean
like at that point, you go with a young guy like Michael Penix, try to get something going. I mean, their roster is not go. They're going to finish last in the NFC North. Let's call it how it is. They're going
you
to
think?
finish.
Because I don't think so. I think Chicago will finish last, especially if Eberflus is there. I think even if they do have Caleb, I think the Vikings roster is good enough with Kirk or Penix or whoever they would draft to win 8, 9 games. I think Chicago is about a 6, 7 win team.
I mean, I just don't know if I want to buy them as a 6, 7 win team with a guy like Caleb Williams, maybe with Justin Fields. But I think with Caleb Williams, that team could easily make a playoff run. I don't know because
Yeah, I think
I'm
I
also
don't know. I
anticipating.
just think the
I'm
coaching.
all. I'm also anticipating they go out and make a bunch of moves. They have a bunch of money as well.
Okay,
Um,
yeah, I mean
I
that's fair.
yeah.
As
So
currently
I'm
constructed, I don't know. Okay,
currently
so I'm
constructed.
gonna ask you one last question then, because you threw me a curveball with that one. Because I had Penix pretty much earmarked to Seattle. I thought it's a perfect fit for him. So what does Seattle do?
That's a tough question. I don't really know what Seattle does. Maybe you kick the tires on God, I know we just talked about him, but maybe you want to kick the tires on Mac Jones. I mean, like, I really don't know what Seattle would do because right now they have Geno Smith, and I think he's still on contract. I mean, you could just keep giving Geno 2-year contracts and just hoping that there's a class that could be all right. I mean, Geno's not a bad quarterback.
He's
That's
not,
my
but in
thing.
that division, you got to do better, especially if Arizona does what we think they do. You just talked about this with Chicago. I think Arizona is the team that you just said Chicago is going to be, which is if Kyler and Marvin Harrison work, I think the Rams last year was a little bit based off their schedule a little bit. We don't know how much time Stafford has left. I think maybe a year or two. I think Arizona is going to be really good in that division. And I think if you run it back with Geno Smith, you're in a Viking situation, which you think, which is you're a fourth place team.
Yeah, I don't know because I think they made some cuts today, obviously, which Jamal Adams, Quandre Diggs. I mean, to get some money relieved, sure, you had to make those moves regardless. But I think that what the Seahawks are going to do is, I honestly think that just their mind of thinking is going to be, we're going to go ahead and ride with Geno for this year. If there's a young guy that they like in this draft, like I couldn't even tell you anyone. You know what? Here, I'll throw a name out there. Spencer Rattler. What if they feel good
Okay.
about Spencer Rattler? Okay.
Interesting.
If they feel good about Spencer Rattler and having him develop behind a guy like Geno Smith, who's a leader, who's a good example of how his career wasn't how it was, but he molded it into something kind of like what Spencer Rattler had to do. He
No,
was
I
not
like it.
like he wasn't the guy in Oklahoma. He was not the guy. And then you go ahead and you see that he goes to South Carolina, sure, plays better, but South Carolina, isn't a good team. It's kind of like Geno Smith gets drafted. Everyone thinks he's the guy in New York. He wasn't. Then he's a backup, takes Russell Wilson's job. Now he's a serviceable quarterback.
Like that clip from the Bridgewater podcast? If so, make sure you go down there and hit that subscribe button. While you're down there hitting the subscribe button, make sure to also hit the notification bell so you never miss another upload. And make sure you check out all the other clips from the Bridgewater podcast right here on YouTube.